Okay, so the question I was supposed to answer is how does society decide who to include or exclude? And I'm just going to give you my answer and then you can give me feedback, okay? In the novel, it's clear that society makes decisions about who to include or exclude based on the individual. In other words, we decide for us who is worthy of inclusion, and usually the people we choose are like us somehow. We are much more apt to exclude someone who appears different from us because typically, like the characters in To Kill a Mockingbird, we fear them. You know, like how the kids are like all kind of afraid of Boo Radley, and so they talk about him behind his back, and they don't really want him to be part of the neighborhood. It's basically like that idea.
Okay, so what I heard you say is that people choose people that are like them to include, and they're going to include people not like them because why?
So I think basically, like if you think about just like yourself, like your crew tends to have more in common with you than not, right? And so we kind of decide to leave people out of our crew because they're different than we are in some kind of way. It could be something small, could be like race, could be class, could just be like they're shy and we're not, or like maybe they have like some sort of disability that we're not familiar with. And sometimes I don't even think we do it to be mean. It's just like we exclude people who are different than us naturally because I think we have fears about it.
That makes sense. I can definitely connect to that, and I feel like I've seen that. I'm wondering though, like what evidence in To Kill a Mockingbird, like the text itself, like makes you think that?
Yeah. So okay, so right here in this chapter, in chapter 12, so Scout is at this meeting with the Baptist missionary women who come over for tea time with Aunt Alexandra. And it's just all these like, you know, older white women talking, and they get to the subject of, you know, their missionary work. And they're talking about like those poor, like brown-skinned people in Africa, like, oh, the horror and the like dirt and filth of the way they live. And here they are, these women like sitting here having this fancy tea together, and it's so easy for them to choose to not relate with that group of people, and they view themselves not only as like an other but a better other. And that's like where exclusion comes from in our society, I think. I think that like scene is a really good example of it.
So am I understanding you correctly that in that scene, race played a role because like the white women were excluding people of like a different race because they didn't feel like empathy or like a connection for them?
I think that's definitely it, and I think, you know, it's really obvious that To Kill a Mockingbird is definitely about race. Like, you know, Tom Robinson is obviously excluded from Maycomb because he is like the black man accused of a crime he didn't commit, and it's just easy because he's different, right? But I think there's something else at play in the missionary circle, and I think it's this like element of like the savageness of living in like an African country, right? Or the savageness of like being in like a tribal culture. To these women, that's just like something they think it's wrong. They don't think it's different even. They think it's wrong. And probably because they fear it, it's just easier for them to write it off. And you can kind of see the contrast in that chapter because Scout doesn't really get it. Scout doesn't really understand. She's too young to have developed these conceptions and perceptions of societies other than her own. And she just kind of views everybody as folks, which she actually says later in the book, like, I think there's just one kind of folks.